Hello, and welcome to this video on the Pocket Scion from Instruo and Modern Biology. Here's what's to come in the video.
So it's a weird way of connecting plants and biomatter to a synthesizer.
And I held the pads, I was like, oh, it works on me as well.
Just kind of freeing the idea of plant music sounding like something in particular.
Hi guys!
A mushroom does not sound like a pentatonic scale.
Yeah.
This video is sponsored by Instruo. Now up front, I want to mention that while serving as a demo and a video guide to the Pocket Scion, this video also shares a story-led, choppy documentary style with my first experiences with it, taking it on holiday, cutting into interview footage from a trip up to Instruo HQ to meet the team and learn all about it, and we'll bounce between all of these things as well as demo parts that I make here at home in my usual style. See the timing index in the description below to skip around to what you'd like to see. So some of you may be aware of the original Scion module from Instruo, which allowed you to connect sensors to a plant and measure fluctuations in current and output force CVs and gates into a Eurorack system. Well, Instruo have a new handheld version with the Pocket Scion. Here's what's in the package. A note on biosonification, and it's worth noting this is a collaboration between the artist Modern Biology and Instruo. You get a sensor, which will come in handy later, and of course, the Pocket Scion device itself. The Pocket Scion is a battery or USB-powered portable instrument. And first, just overviewing what it is, there's a curated set of built-in instruments here, and you select between the 4 instruments on this instrument select button. This outputs stereo on a mini jack for line level or headphone audio, and that has a volume control with these 2 buttons. This is turned on with the little switch on the side, and it also outputs MIDI on a 3.5mm TRS output, and that MIDI outputs over a micro USB output too, and there's an app to really tailor this data. The Pocket Scion can be played via contact points on the front of the instrument, or you can play it via the included sensor, which just plugs into the sensor socket. Again, mini jack there. And then you could be touching these sensors, connecting them to plants, fungi, organic matter, and measuring the fluctuations to play these instruments or output MIDI or raw data. And you could even drive that sensor input from an audio source. There's really a lot to explore. And to scale how busy the resulting MIDI data and audio is, there's sensitivity controls right there to dial in the behavior that you're looking for. So let's start by jumping into my first experiences with the built-in instruments in the Pocket Scion.
Hi guys!
My experience with Pocket Scion started with receiving one for me and the OG DivBaby to play with on holiday, and she wanted to be on camera doing so, and these literally arrived the day before we left. So I'd like to start by just sharing the kind of first sound and experiences with what it does kind of out of the box. These patches are direct audio outputs from Pocket Scion with no processing. The different instruments are labelled on screen and match up with the colours on the LEDs showing the 5 voices played via the sensors connected to different plants. You're listening to the audio captured in sync with each video clip here. So that's the sound and response of the built-in instruments on the Pocket Scion, in this case played via sensors connected to plants, but you could also be playing those contact points like a handheld instrument. So after getting back from holiday, I then went up to Instruo HQ to learn more about the Pocket Scion and its history that led to it. Let's head up through beautiful countryside, through North Yorkshire, the Lake District, and up into Scotland. Arriving at Instruo HQ, things look a bit different from last time I was up here, so here's a B-roll supercut of the building. Be inside my B-roll. To see more of the team and Instruo HQ, check out the Instruo tour video down below. So we're here to chat Pocket Scion.
Yeah.
What would you say it is?
I'll let you.
I guess for someone that maybe even doesn't know what the Scion module is.
Yeah.
What is Scion and the Pocket Scion?
So it's a weird way of connecting plants and biomatter to a synthesizer. Is kind of the shortest of answers. So it's a form of galvanometer circuit sensor that is then interpreted by a microcontroller, converted to MIDI notes, or in the case of the module Scion, to convert to DAC values to generate analog voltages. This was the first project that me and Keen collaborated on. I remember you pulling up like the MIDI sprout, like,
Yes.
like the GitHub, and we're having a look through, and I was like, oh, it's just Arduino code.
Yeah.
We can work with this.
I'd been making like DIY versions of the original MIDI sprout to use with. I'd made quite a large collection of DIY modules, and I got like laser cut cardboard boxes to make little cases for the original MIDI sprout, and I would use that into like a MIDI to CV converter to then use for making like big generative patches and stuff. And I loved it, and I just thought, oh, it'd be really convenient if this was all in one module. So I spoke to Jason. I was like, oh, I know a person that might be able to help me do that.
Yeah.
I liked the notion of kind of machine music, of like kind of how can I interact with these things that make sound and in that sort of way. And so when I saw a video of someone using the original MIDI sprout with a plant, like I had no concept that you could get a signal from a plant. There was something about that just like kind of really resonated with me. So yeah, initially I was only thinking about it for plants, and then as soon as I got it going and I held the pads, I was like, oh, it works on me as well. The amount of things that you can plug into it has kind of come out much later. Like the idea that you can plug a jack into it or any sort of signal into it didn't.
Mushrooms took us by surprise. Like seeing
mushrooms, I was like, how
Tarun
would
stuff
you,
on Instagram. I was like, oh, wow.
That took off. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I had no idea about any of that. I was just like, a houseplant was mind blowing enough.
Once people realise it also doesn't have to be the plant, like your performance that you came and did at Modular Meets Leeds, just touching the end of a cable, just seeing it as a kind of quad random
controllable
generator.
input source that you just
Yeah.
and I think it was speaking to Tarun
Yeah.
that where he was interested in a device, and for him, his main priority was accessibility.
Hi, my name is Tarun. My artist name is Modern Biology. I make music with bioelectricity, with field recordings, with the fluctuating rhythms and sounds of the natural environment. And I'm super stoked to be working with Instruo on the Pocket Scion. We've been throwing around some ideas for the last year and a half or so based on, I guess, about the last 5 years of experimenting for me and longer experimenting for them with this idea of biofeedback, biodata sonification. So I am a biologist. I grew up in Montreal, did an undergrad in marine biology and then a master's in oceanography, and quickly got caught up in the life of being in a touring band. And over the course of the pandemic, fell in love with this whole body of work that emerged in the late 70s around making music with plants and also fungi.
The actual instruments, the sonic instruments, that ended up being Tarun that took lead in curating those.
I created the 4 instruments on the Pocket Scion with the help of Kian from Instruo, and was really trying to capture the feeling and the timbres that I get from my modular rig when I'm doing, shows and making videos for the internet. So these tend to be pentatonic scales because it's a little easier to deal with randomness when you know that the level of dissonance is going to be relatively low. The sort of biological meaning is baked not into the scales or the timbre. The biological meaning is baked into the kind of level of activity that we're seeing. So not getting too hung up on how things sound, I think is helpful, because then there's a lot more freedom with regards to what you want it to sound like. And I think being able to plug this into a phone or plug this into a computer or plug this into any of your other synthesizers is a wonderful thing. Just kind of freeing the idea of plant music sounding like something in particular and allowing it to be just a source of data input and modulation on musical compositions is probably more exciting and, more biologically accurate. So have fun. I can't wait to see what you create.
This interview section is cut from a longer form discussion, and that discussion is available right now exclusively on patreon.com/DivKid. And we will come back up to Instruo HQ for some different bits of sessions and studio footage, but let's get into actually just trying this with plants and hardware synths. So now I'm back at home, I thought I'd try out the Pocket Scion with a mono synth, in this case Seashell from Instruo, video on that link down below. I've gone and got a grass plant here in this pot from outside. I'm taking the sensor from the plant into the Pocket Scion, MIDI TRS straight into the Seashell, Seashell into mood into the microcosm, and if I remove the effects, let's make the envelope really percussive here. And I'm playing around with the sensitivity on the back. Within the app, you can turn this ratcheting off. You'll hear these kind of little kind of craziness going on. In this instance, it might be nicer to turn that off, but we'll get to the app later. And also, this is polyphonic MIDI just kind of being slammed into the monophonic Seashell here. You could go in and play around with the MIDI settings too and get a less active kind of single channel into the Seashell here. Open up the envelopes, add in some effects. This is mood, big kind of grungy lo-fi drone, and this is the microcosm, both granular and reverb. And it's the sensors here on this grass and the changes in current and resistance through the plant. It's firing off the 5 voices of internal MIDI. That polyphonic MIDI is being slammed into Seashell, giving these kind of glitchy behaviors. I quite like in this instance. Bit of wave folder and resonance there on Seashell. And we'll pull some reverb in. And as it's polyphonic, let's just get a polysynth and just check out a similar setup here. So moving on from the plant, I'm just going to play this with the touch plates. It's really nice as a gestural kind of random generator. This is battery-powered Pocket Scion, TRS MIDI out through an adapter into DIN MIDI into the back of this Roland Boutique. And then into the Chase Bliss and Meris reverb pedal. And with low sensitivity, it's quite nice to hold and just rub that contact plate for some gesture and movement. But then upping sensitivity, it's quite nice to kind of touch and back off, let things breathe, and then touch again. Creating this polyphonic gestural pad thing. And the Pocket Scion here has been set up in the app for a natural minor scale. You could choose, say, pentatonic scales and keep things kind of less clashing. We'll look at the app later though. So let's take a look at the Pocket Scion app. Loading this up, it waits for the device to connect, so I'll plug this in via USB now. This is the iOS version, it's there for Windows and Linux, I believe, as well, on the website. And it's a relatively simple, easy to use app. You can see the different instruments there, with the different color coding that is the instruments built into the device. But these are also your scale settings and note choices, not just for playing the internal instruments on Pocket Scion, but for the MIDI that each of those instrument modes transmits out of the device to other things as well. You can turn notes on and off, you can go in and select specific scales if you know what you want. And that top right icon flashing there is saving these settings to the device, which will be remembered when you unplug it and go use it and power it on and off elsewhere. You can also turn ratcheting on and off per each one of those modes. So again, this affects the internal instruments and the data that this puts out. We then have the per voice MIDI controls, when we have a single channel mode where all 5 voices output through the same MIDI channel. You have a range control of up to 5 octaves of potential information, and you can offset that down 2 octaves or up to 2 octaves above as well, and that's per voice. And you get an associated MIDI CC as well as the note information per voice. There's then a multi-channel mode where each voice transmits down a different MIDI channel, allowing this to be routed to different parts, different instruments and layers within a production, for example, and you can then individually select which MIDI channel each voice outputs through. And at the bottom of the app, we have the OSC data. This isn't something that I've used at this stage, although Dom from the team up at Instruo was showing me some visuals controlled by OSC, which we'll take a look at later in the video. So that's the app. It's been mentioned and will be mentioned again later. I just wanted to kind of stop and just take a look and show you what's on there. So with the ability to set different MIDI channels, you'd been playing, we were looking yesterday at like polyphonic kind of tracking into Logic and different instruments, almost orchestral sounds at points.
Yeah, I was just kind of messing about because I was wanting to try, just different sounds basically from the Pocket Scion. I was just like, I want to kind of create more an instrument type of thing. So
is that something you set in the app for Pocket Scion?
Yes. So we've got 5 MIDI channels, and we've set it to multi-channel. And I've also put the ratcheting on, so it kind of picks up little blips and bloops and Just
Yeah,
gives
little
a bit more
flurries and-
a bit more texture and stuff like that. And I've just kind of set this kind of nice scale. This is on the Treebeards Kyoto, but obviously we won't hear the actual.
Yeah, we're not listening to Pocket Scion at this
Yeah,
point.
we're
This is all
just-
software instruments.
It's all software, so if we go back over to our Logic, we've got the first instrument here, which is channel 1. So all these sounds are taken from Keyscape, which has got really nice, just really nice rows, pianos, little bell sounds, and I quite like them for this because they've got loads of kind of just wee, kind of organic, kind of like the mechanical sounds of the keys and stuff.
It's
like
almost your own little trailer cue happening, even just with one track.
Yeah,
It works really well.
yeah, totally. And that was what I was thinking when I was trying to make this up. I was like, I want them all to work together, but like if you just want 2 or 3 just to play, it will still sound really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, give it a wee prompt there.
So I guess point being, coming in as different separate tracks, they can all be different instruments.
Yeah,
Whether they're slightly different variations of these key sounds or totally different.
totally. You could go like pure mental and like put different drum hits. Like get some pure blip.
Randomly timed
Yeah.
drum hits. So if you pull in some other tracks, you'll end up with this kind of polyphonic bed. Guess you can almost play over. It's almost like an inspiration background texture.
That's it. Totally. And then I can just like play along if you want.
I'm going to try it. I mean, as I say earlier in this video, I've played with this really root level on holiday, so I'm just here to just pillage ideas for what I'm going to do when I get back as well.
Yeah, totally, man.
So I'll give it a go. It's a really nice use case for that, I think.
Yeah, I think it'll be really fun. I want to definitely hear just like completely random ones.
I'm not going to go drum hits. but
No, drum hits.
I'll try some different instruments.
I'll try some drum hits.
So inspired by Matthew, here I've built my own polyphonic multi-channel MIDI instrument that I'm going to play here in Ableton Live, as well as changing settings in the Pocket Scion app. Opening up the app, we can see I've selected multi-channel MIDI, and you can see each of the 5 voices has a different MIDI channel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I've set a basic minor triad as the available notes through Pocket Scion, which I'll come back and adjust later. If I just play the Pocket Scion, here's the sound of this new multi-track DAW instrument. And on this first channel, just as an example of what's coming in, I have a contact piano that's playing from all available MIDI channels, so it's going to play all the notes from the 5 voices on the Pocket Scion. So that's a good example of what's coming out of Pocket Scion, and going back into the app, we can play around with what notes are available. And in terms of musical approach, this is like creating gestures within a chord tone, and then going back to the different channels. I don't want all ins to affect all instruments. So you can see here in Ableton, I'm sending different MIDI channels to different MIDI instruments. Each channel is a different orchestral instrument library with different effects on the different channels. So turning on all the channels here, and then playing the Pocket Scion app, I'm going to move from C minor to E flats, just changing one available note at a time. Dropping the E flat to a D for an inverted G minor. And let's bump the sensitivity up just for more activity from Pocket Scion. The note G down to F for an inverted B flat major chord. B to A flat for a diminished D. the note D to C for an inverted F minor chord tone, then to an inverted A flat, and back to our minor triad. So this is multi-channel MIDI, creating my own, in this case, kind of affected orchestral instrument out of the different voices. And this would be really lovely as a textural bed to sequence and play over.
There was a random little experiment that I tried where I pulled out, I've got one of the camera connector adapters for iPhone. The Pocket Scion's USB MIDI stuff, it's class compliant. This works plug and play with iOS even.
So breaking off to trying this at home, of course I trust that it's as simple as they say, but I wanted to check it out for myself. Here's the Pocket Scion playing analogue on my phone. And this is the USB output through a USB cable into a USB A to C adapter into my phone. I've set up analogue, you can see the MIDI here on the settings on screen. And just going back to the scale settings, I've set these to be chromatic because there's inbuilt scale settings on the Pocket Scion that I want to make use of.
The MIDI coming out, it's going to be playing in key with exactly, well, as long as whatever synth you're controlling is tuned to concert pitch, then yeah, everything's going to run in key. So it means that you can use the built-in instruments and add more layers to it, like just using the same MIDI notes, doubling up voices.
And that's a really lovely idea, layering things here. So here's just a gesture just from the analogue, totally dry. And then the same thing with the direct audio out from Pocket Scion. And then both of them layered together.
You can pull out parallel CC data. So I think there's something like even trying like the hologram microcosm pedal, like it's got a MIDI input. So we just like patched the MIDI out from the Pocket Scion into that and just had that control variables in its effects. So yeah, anything that receives MIDI, that best case you can curate what the CCs are per parameter. Then you can use the Pocket Scion as a random influence or a modulation influence to all sorts of gear, like not just the note information, but just variable CCs.
I can almost see it on a pedal board. Now you mentioned the microcosm pedal or other MIDI control pedals, just with a big toe sliding over and giving it a nudge of CC tonal change. I'm gonna really struggle to not go home and.
I'm going to expect that and I'm going to look for that scene in this video.
I'll blur it out. No one wants to see that. So prepare yourselves, because I couldn't help myself. This is the Pocket Scion on the pedal board. It's going to be controlled by my big toe. I'll blur it because this isn't OnlyFans, but we're going to hope and try to get some different reverb changes. Watch those motorized faders. I thought it was a nice visual. And unfortunately, the changes aren't that huge. Maybe it doesn't like my big toe. But also the reverb changes on the pedal aren't that drastic anyway. Feeling a big anticlimax and really let down there by my big toe. I'll be having words of it later. I did try just playing the Pocket Scion from my hands on the contacts, my fingers, and you can see these faders jump around much more clearly. So my fingers must be more conductive than my big toe is. Well, up in Glasgow with Instruo, I learnt with Dom that you could use the Pocket Scion to control visuals via MIDI and OSC data. Dom mentioned that in programs such as Touch Designer, different OSC data can be scaled and used to drive certain parameters within a visual network, which sounds like a fascinating way of connecting organic matter with audio and visuals, or even just human touch defining gestural visual changes in that sort of software. If this is of interest to you, a Touch Designer project file is available to download on pocketscion.com to help you get started.
When you get into plugging plants into synths, there's lots of like
Smoke and mirrors. A lot of it is
and like people can come to different conclusions, and then there's people making products that capitalize on that. So people make products that are like
there's definitely a pushback from certain people with these kind of products where they just say, outright, a mushroom does not sound like a pentatonic scale and it's like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Why do plants always sound like reverb?
So the common misconception is that what you hear from the Scion or the Pocket Scion is the sound of the plant. There are a few steps of
the idea you're listening to mushrooms, and mushrooms sound like pentatonic scales. And
so there is a way that we can listen more directly to what the plant's doing, because what we're hearing here is a sonification of data interpretation of an analog sensor. Let's look at this Scion first, and let's listen to the Scion raw output, because that's a feature of the module that I included in from an early development stage, and this is the buffered raw pulse output of that analog sensor. And it's not the most musical thing in the world, but it's very immediate, responsive, and performable, and that is that sound there. So what the circuit is, it's a little 555 timer that, as I'm making contact between tip and sleeve, I'm completing that circuit. So I'm a variable resistor in this context. So the more pressure I put on, the higher the frequency, because I'm lowering the resistance, the faster the cap charges and resets. So this is kind of as direct as it would get listening to a plant. So we've got our little friend here.
On a plant.
And this is a real plant. This is a fake plant for anyone that has curiosity there. So this is not the most responsive plant. I might need to bump the sensitivity all the way up to get a bit more motion. I can also influence it. But what we're hearing here is the settled frequency of this particular plant connecting these two electrode points. So it actually makes a difference, like how much pressure there is,
how much contact with the plant itself.
There we go. So I'll just reset that a little bit, and it's kind of settling at sort of stable points. So the thing that the algorithm that generates the random notes does is it's looking at fluctuations between these pulses. So when it lands on stability, that's when we get sort of a bit more.
Is that just then akin to inactivity? Effectively?
Exactly.
If that was just a steady,
if it was a perfectly stable
pulse that's not moving,
then we'd lose that actual the data that's been sourced from this interaction. That's on the original Scion. So let's jump over to the Pocket Scion and see how that relates, because there is actually a little Easter egg mode. If I hold down the instrument shift and the sensitivity buttons, hold those three down, it'll blink. There we go. And this is a version of that raw output.
You now get raw data at this point from these touch points.
Exactly.
Or it could be the sensor.
Yeah, so if we put the sensor straight in, then there's our plant. So this is kind of listening to, this is more directly the sound of the plant, or the plant as a direct resistor, and this is the end result. And what the algorithm does is it's measuring fluctuations in delta times between these pulses. And that's what's driving the main function and sourcing all this random data that's driving musical instruments. Kind of to show a demonstration of that in context, if I go back to one of the instruments,
So same 3 buttons to
Yep.
go back.
There we go. I like the Scion instrument. So this is just ticking over, so there's enough activity from this plant generating that pulse wave, but it's got enough fluctuations that it's
driving the algorithm in the
yeah,
thing.
there's
gives
continuous sonification of the raw data. So this is a good example of where that comes into effect. So this is my sensor input over the Scion. If I give it a square wave, if I let it settle on a steady tone, we see the activity of the algorithm stalls out. But if I give it some movement, some modulation, that's where the delta times are getting scrambled. Yeah. I think it depends on like fundamental frequency. If we get to a lower one and let it stall out, it should settle on inactivity. Well, that is with the sensitivity max. So like a better example might be lower sensitivity, and then as I wobble the frequency, that's going to be a bit more of a filtered responsiveness. And let's just see the sensitivity shaping on, or level of the algorithm on the Pocket Scion is quite different. So I think I'm going to need to play with the sensitivity values and bring that down to a point where it's quite low. So I'll find a point where it's kind of stalled out. There we are. So if I give it movement, it's triggering. But then it will stall out when it's a stable frequency. So that's how plants, mushrooms, organic material is being sonified, is playing the instrument. It's using the fluctuations that occur naturally from it being an unstable insert point in this analog circuit.
So it's quite interesting with an oscillator, it not doing anything effectively when the sensitivity is set right and that's stable. You could be kind of rhythmically triggering envelopes that change the pitch of the oscillator as timed kind of mechanisms for flurries of random notes.
That's where I've built, I mean, kind of akin to massive Krell patches where the whole thing's generative, where I use the output audio, maybe saturate that so it becomes more square wave, and use that plugged into the sensor input in the Scion, so the whole sound of the piece generates this,
is influencing the kind of start source of the piece.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do the same thing, to just wiggle it around.
So that's how we're listening to plants via the Scion. Like we're not listening to the direct sound that the plant's making. It's a couple of layers of extrapolation, but it's the driving force. It's the thing that is controlling and playing the instrument.
So I'd really like to get into exploring the Pocket Scion and modular synths, which is something I unfortunately haven't had time to do yet, and I'll likely get into that at a later date with a future video. Things like pulling out the polyphonic MIDI data through something like a Bufacco MIDI Thing 2 I think could lead to some really great results, especially with the option of not just patching polyphonic voices in modular, but things like the MIDI CCs being translated to CV modulation for tonal parameters and shifting effects around. I'm also keen to drive Pocket Scion from the final audio output of a modular patch and have that feed back the audio output back to Pocket Scion's sensors to drive the notes and modulation in a feedback system, kind of like the ultimate generative Krell system. I also think it would make an interesting complementary audio source on its own to further process in a modular system, or even could just be a kind of gestural random generator that you brush your fingers over to influence change in a modular patch. And with it outputting its raw sensor data that we heard with Jason up in the Instruo studio, it could be a harsh noise instrument, or just a human touch-led transitional swoosh generator. So thanks for watching. I hope you've liked this demo come into view part storytime approach. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments. Check out the exclusives on patreon.com/DivKid. Hit like and subscribe, that's all helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye!